You also have permission to record.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi there. Thank you for joining. For folks that are just joining, we're going to wait until just a couple of minutes after 11 so that we have critical mass, and then we'll get started. I am going to ask that people mute themselves and keep their cameras off until we get to Q&A, because the way the Zoom works is that it's going to highlight whoever's speaking. And so we're going to start with comments from the secretary, then we'll go to Q&A, where people can either drop a question in the chat and I will read it, or they can put their hand up and I will call on them. Just sort of like we did it last time if you were here for our last press availability on this topic. So please hang tight for a few more minutes, and I'll give you a good little chat, a good little warning when we're ready to go live. The question, is there a way we can record this Zoom call? You are welcome to record this Zoom call however you see fit.
This will also permission from the host.
So you, this will also be on our Facebook page as a Facebook Live, so you'll be able to access the video that way.
Got it. Thank you.
Great for next year.
Hey everyone, we are going to get started soon. I'm asking that everyone please keep themselves muted and your cameras off until we get to the Q&A. That way the secretary will be featured prominently on our Facebook Live. We've had some questions about recording. You are welcome to record this however you technologically see fit. We will also have this up on our Facebook Live for your access. So just a reminder, please keep yourself muted. We'll get started in just a minute. The secretary will have some remarks and then we'll do some Q&A. You are welcome to, during the Q&A, either raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature and I will call on you, or you can drop a question in the chat and I will read from the chat. So we have people joining at a steady pace. So I'm just going to give it another minute or two and then hand it over to the secretary to get us started. Great, so we're just going to wait a minute and work on the recording permission for folks. Someone else is doing the behind the scenes work on this. I'm just your MC, so thank you for your patience. As a reminder, please stay muted and off camera, and we'll get started with the secretary in just a minute. Okay, we have, thank you, Dick. We have given everyone recording permission. I don't want to call anyone out, but there's still some of you that are not muted. So please mute yourself, and please make sure your camera is off, because we will be featuring the secretary here. Madam Secretary, are you ready for us to toss it over to you? Great. Well, then I will get rid of my camera and go on mute. And like I said, we'll do some Q&A at the end. People can raise their hands or drop questions in the chat and I will read them out. And so now I hand it over to you.
Well, good morning. I'm Shemia Fagan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am honored to serve as Oregon's 28th Secretary of State. Today, the Oregon Supreme Court unanimously upheld the Election Division's determination that Nick Kristof is not eligible to run for Oregon governor because he has not yet been a resident within Oregon for 3 years as required by the Oregon Constitution. First, I just want to thank the court for their quick and decisive action. I also want to thank Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and the attorneys of the Department of Justice, including Solicitor General Ben Gutman, for their partnership in this case. As Oregon's chief elections officer, I have a responsibility to apply the rules fairly. It doesn't matter what political party you belong to. It doesn't matter if you're a well-funded frontrunner or if you're a political novice. Everyone will be treated fairly by the Oregon Elections Division. Today's decision affirms the standard that state and local elections officials have long used to determine eligibility to seek elected office in Oregon. An objective standard that is based on fact. As noted in the court's decision today, quote, the Elections Division correctly emphasized that it's not their role to determine whether any candidate is sufficiently Oregonian or to examine the depth or sincerity of a candidate's emotional connection to Oregon, unquote. This matters. This matters because subjectivity in election law has an ugly history in Oregon and across the country of preventing people of color and women, immigrants, and other historically marginalized people from full participation in our democracy. I am delighted that we are moving forward with a clear, objective standard for Oregon election officials to apply. As a champion of voter access, as a legislator, and now as Secretary of State, I am also delighted that Oregon's strong legacy of voter accessibility remains intact. Today, the court confirmed what we knew all along. The decision that election officials in this case made in no way endangers the right to vote for military service members, students living out of state, Oregonians who are houseless, formerly incarcerated people, or any other Oregonians. Since the question was raised in the media, I am pleased the court addressed those important constitutional provisions in their ruling. I also want to acknowledge that there are people who are disappointed with today's ruling from the court, just like there were many who disagreed with the original decision to disqualify Mr. Kristof. That's okay. It's okay. Disagreeing, criticizing the decision, challenging the decision in court, those are all signs of a healthy democracy. But unfortunately, some people did cross a line here, and I'm going to speak to that. So let me be clear. This decision was about treating everyone equally under the rules. Baseless attacks that the decision was corrupt, politically motivated, or biased were wrong. Increasing harassment and attacks on election workers here in Oregon and across the country often begin with empty allegations of bias or corruption. We're seeing an increase in harassment targeting election workers and even death threats toward county clerks right here in Oregon. That's why I'm working with the legislature to pass an election worker safety bill to protect the people who protect our elections. So I just want to urge candidates and elected officials and members of the media to carefully consider the impact of your words. I urge you to diligently avoid creating or repeating mis or disinformation about elections and elections workers. We are living through an historic erosion of trust in our democracy, and it is on all of us to restore it. I'm once again joined by Elections Director Deborah Scroggin and Compliance Specialist Lydia Plukchi. I believe you have time for some questions.
Yes, we do. And thank you folks that are putting your hands up, and thank you everyone for staying muted. In the meantime, we've got a number of hands up, so we'll go through those. If folks have questions they want to put in the chat, they're welcome to do that as well. We'll start with Dirk Vanderhart from OPB.
Hey, can you hear me, Secretary?
Yes, Dirk.
Okay, a couple quick questions. One, I guess with that last bit, are you saying that members of your staff or folks you know about were harassed or threatened directly as a result of some of the Kristof things and the decision that came out of your office? The second is, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything in terms of the options that that campaign has with the money that it's raised for what it can do with it. So if you all could help us understand what they can do with all these millions of dollars now, that would be appreciated.
Dirk, increasing harassment and attacks on election workers often begin with empty allegations saying that something was biased or corrupt. And so we're asking people to be careful. We don't want people in Oregon or across the country, election workers, to ever be targeted. And so we're just calling out the fact that we're going to call out attacks on election workers. We're going to call out empty allegations against our electoral process, no matter which party or who makes those allegations. I'm not aware of any specific attacks, but I do know that our elections division workers, when surveyed in response to our work on the elections division, the Election Worker Protection Act, that in our elections division, we did an anonymous survey of our team, and our own elections division workers have been screamed at, sexually explicit remarks over decisions that they made that candidates didn't agree with. I'm not aware of any specifically with regard to Mr. Kristof, but it's also inappropriate to make those allegations that are baseless and that have no basis in fact. And with respect to Mr. Kristof's money, that's a question for him. Deborah Scroggin, our election director, is on here today with respect to what his options are. Deborah, do you want to take that question?
Sure. Yeah, Dirk, it's really fact specific depending on what a candidate wants to do. And so we would wait to see what they would ask us and give them advice from there. Generally, the campaign has about 10 days to make changes to their committee. So we should see that soon.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Let's move on to Julia Shumway with the Capitol Chronicle.
Yeah, and I just wanted to understand the money issue a little more. So is it, can he change this into a different kind of campaign committee? Is it possible for him to refund this $1.6 million? Is he able to give money away to other committees? What can he do?
Deborah, do you want to take that one again? I know that we talked about that on our call earlier today.
Sure, all of those are possibilities.
Are there any other possibilities or just those three?
It really depended on what the campaign wanted to do. whether it was to close it, to transfer it to another office, to donate it like you suggested. There's a number of different options. So we would wait for that question in their direction and help them from there.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dick Hughes.
Thank you very much as I try to navigate these various buttons on my laptop. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Dick.
Thank you. I apologize if I'm asking simple questions or simplistic questions, I should say, but I want to make sure I understand the ruling. The Supreme Court didn't say that he couldn't be on the ballot. They said you were justified in your ruling, in the decision you made. Is that correct?
The court, Mr. Kristof's campaign was a request to the court asking them to make me put him on the ballot. And the court said no. So
right.
He is not to be on the ballot based on the record that we had before us. The information that he provided did not establish that he had been a resident within Oregon for the 3 years prior to the November 2022 election.
And the court said your decision was justifiable the way you made it. But as I interpret it, the court left room that if you made a different decision, the court might have decided it would have been justifiable. But I'm not a lawyer and you are. Is that, am I inferring that correctly? Basically, the court said you knew what you were doing.
What the court did today that was probably the most significant legally was establishing that how you determine residence for purposes of Article 5, Section 2 is domicile. That was really the legal issue with this case. Then when you look at the facts, which again, this is what our elections officials, county clerks have been doing for years. They may not have known it was called domicile, but they were using this. What the court said was, keep up the good work, you're doing it the right way. And when you look at the domicile text, the facts were simply overwhelming, as Ms. Plucci determined in her determination, and as that we accepted that he was not domiciled in Oregon for the 3 years prior to the November 2022 election.
Thank you. Then one quick follow-up question. To make sure I understand what you were saying about comments or accusations that were inappropriate, could you be more specific? Are you referring to things that the Kristof campaign or supporters said? I know that Kristof said some things at his press conference after your decision was announced. Is that what you're referring to, the inappropriate comments?
Again, I want to emphasize that disagreeing with the decision, criticizing the decision, disagreeing on the law, all signs of a healthy democracy. But we are seeing an increase since 2020 in mis and disinformation and in information that is used as a basis to harass and attack election workers, including here in Oregon. And so what we're going to do in our office, no matter who it's coming from, is to acknowledge that baseless accusations, that decisions are politically motivated, again, without any evidence, baseless accusations, those are often the beginning of attacks on election workers. And so we want to establish that as an office, it doesn't matter who those come from, that we're gonna acknowledge those, that they are wrong, and that we all need to build trust in our elections. And that starts by not repeating or making baseless accusations against election workers.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this.
Let's move on to Gold Meadows with KMTR.
Good morning. You mentioned that the campaign has 10 days to make changes to their committee. Could you expound on the types of changes they could make and how that would impact what they can do with the money raised?
Absolutely. Deborah, do you want to go ahead and take that one as well?
Sure. For instance, if they wanted to change it for a different office, that would need to occur within 10 days. But anything else that they would want to do, we would just wait for that question and go from there. But that, I hope, answers your question. If they wanted to donate it to another PAC, for instance, we would need to see that pretty much resolved within 10 days.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to Rachel Monahan from Willamette Week, I believe.
That is correct. I'm with William Week. Hi there. I just wanted to follow, as you know, I think there's a couple issues that my colleagues in the press have already covered, but I just want to be very clear on one point that I'm not quite clear on. You've if I'm not mistaken, you've described some accusations that were made about the decision as baseless or across the line or just plain wrong. Did anything Mr. Kristof say after the decision was announced? Would you describe anything he said on those terms?
I mean, I said what I said, and yes, I would. Mr. Kristof accused this of being a politically motivated decision, and he was wrong. The Supreme Court today unanimously affirmed the decision that was made by the elections officials in this case and the process they used and the legal standard that they applied.
Thank you.
Great. Let's go to Pat Doris with KGW, and then we've got a question in the chat that I will read.
Hi, Pat. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just said I'm using a new system. Can you hear me okay? And thank you for that. So I assume that this ruling is a precedent that will be applied to other candidates. And so question one is, would it be applied to people running for federal office? And if it is, does that mean that someone moving, for example, into the new congressional district would be ineligible to run in that district if they just moved? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. From a legal perspective, this case today is only applying Article 5, Section 2 of the Oregon Constitution, which says that you have to be a resident within the state for 3 years. However, what the court's decision today really did was affirm the standard that state and local elections officials have long used by identifying it as domicile. And so it should not change the way that our local elections officials have been applying that. It just gives it that legal backing that, yes, you've been doing it the right way. I would have to look at the constitutional requirements for the congressional districts, for example, to see if they use the word resident and to see if there'd be any distinguishing factors. But this case in particular was about Article 5, Section 2, which uses a resident within the state. But we believe that it affirms the standard that state and local elections officials have long used in Oregon to determine eligibility to seek elected office.
Okay, thank you.
Great. We do not have any more questions, I believe. If folks do, please put up your hand or drop your question in the chat. As I think you all know, we try to be super responsive, and if there's something you're not getting covered here, please follow up with me or with Ben Morris, our communications director, and we'll be happy to get you an answer. I am not seeing any additional hands up or any questions. So I think we are good to go, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Deborah and Lydia, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.